Hello, Admiral Thrawn here. I am doing a feature preview video for Age of Petty Kings 2.0. For those of you who do not follow me on ModDB or Total War Center, yes, the good news is 2.0 is back on and releasing very soon, as in probably the next 2 weeks. The only thing that's really left for me to do is to write a whole bunch of descriptions for all the various houses, and as well as 50 descriptions for the various in-game houses, which is going to be annoying and take a long time. But apart from that, I'm all done. So yeah, get it pumped. Now I'm just going to show off a couple of new features for those of you who are not familiar with what's going to be going on in 2.0. First of all, one big issue a lot of people have had is that when they tried to start custom battles, they would crash. Here's the reason for that. Basically, whenever you select all, that's broken. Because it has to do with the way that we've handled our recruitment system. All units are available to all factions in the game, and Medieval 2 Total War can only display so many units on the battle roster selection screen. So if you had all selected, it would try to display all the units in the game, and that would crash the game. So we've actually labeled it as broken now. I figured out how to do that. And there's basically 3 options. You have the faction rosters, which just gives you the units of, say, House Stark. Faction rosters plus mercenaries, which lets you include mercenaries, and finally region rosters. That's a particularly fun one for us. What it basically means is that if you say select House Stark and House, I don't know, like Martell or something, basically the Starks can now recruit units for all of the various northern factions, Stagos, the Boltons, the Dustins, the Umbers, include even Night's Watch and wildlings. And the Martells, of course, can recruit their own Martell units, the Roinar, the Danes, the Starfall, like Ullrs, Drylands, you know, all that stuff. So basically, you wanna just, it's nice. You can basically fight these huge battles with, like, you know, all of the North. Also, for that matter, if you wanted to, you could say select Stark and Bolton and then have, like, Starks fight against other Starks. You know? Yeah, so that's just another fun little thing for custom battles. Added a couple of new maps to the game. I might add a couple more before we release, like the Isle of Faces and such. But yeah, the Green Fork. Now, as for the campaign itself, I added a couple of new factions. I replaced House Sunderland because I didn't like the way that they were balanced. Instead, the region of the Bite and the Three Sisters is all going to be rebels. But I did add, first of all, House Dane is now in the game. They were the most requested faction by far for 2.0, and yep, they are pretty darn fun. I really enjoy them. After World of Ice and Fire came out, the sort of companion book, we realized that there was a House Dryland here which ruled over the deserts of Dorne. So I liked the House Volmont UI so much from 1.0 that I basically got rid of House Volmont and replaced them with House Dryland here, because now we know sort of what the kingdoms were. I've also removed House Manderley. Instead, the Manderleys and all of their units will belong to House Gardener, and instead there's House Peak, which will rule over the Dornish Marches, like in Hornhill and the Tarleys, as well as Ashford and that whole area. So they're pretty fun. They basically will serve as a counterbalance to the Gardeners. And then finally, I replaced House Hoar with House Greyjoy. I think that once they laid out what the different houses were, I think the Greyjoys made a lot more sense in this area. And I replaced House Massey with House Bar Emmon, again because they pointed out that the Bar Emmons were actually kings in this era. That, I believe, is all of the new factions. I'll start up a campaign really quickly to show off some of the new units. Okay, so it actually just crashed there if you heard a little beep, and that sort of goes into another important thing of what we will and will not be fixing. There are still some stability issues with the mod, and we're going to fix whatever we can, but there are some things that are simply problems with Medieval 2 Total War, or at the very least that are issues with our code that are not actually, you know, that aren't apparent. It would be something to do with, like, for example, one thing that we caught in 1.0 was that our export units that has all the unit descriptions, that was somehow too short, and so by adding a bunch of padding to that with like a bunch of like extra lines, it made it work. So there are probably some other things like that hidden in our code that we just basically can't find on our own. and that you need a compiler to be able to find. So we'll do what we can for the stability issues, but we aren't going to promise that the whole game will be perfect stability-wise. That's just a heads up about that. So yeah. Now, as for some good news, one thing you might notice, you probably don't notice it now, but we added a whole bunch of new music to the game. That's basically all been redone. I kept the original Game of Thrones theme as the opening because it's awesome and I like it. But the rest of it is basically new music from not only Game of Thrones, but also from other things like Gladiator. Have our credits and all. One thing that is an important thing that a lot of people got confused by in 1.0 that I've hopefully made a bit more clear is that now instead of having to conquer an entire faction to be able to recruit their units, you can basically just conquer the recruitment region. Now what that means is that, say, if you have like Highgarden, if you right-click on the house, scroll down, it'll say at the bottom here, the recruitment region contains, and then list, say, some castles. So, for example, House Osgrave's recruitment region contains Coldmoat, Darkdale, Ambrose, Golden Grove, Old Oak, and Red Lake. So basically, these 6 castles are all one region. So if, say, the Tarbecks conquered the whole thing, then they would be able to recruit these North March units here. So what that does is it basically means that if you're fighting the Gardeners and you conquer, say, all of these Manderley territories up in the north, then you can basically recruit Manderleys up there without having to go and conquer all of the Shield Islands. So that should make things a bit easier and a bit more straightforward for people. I've also rebalanced a bit of the starting positions of the starting diplomacy. So for example, the Gardeners are now essentially at war with everybody. They're at war with the Storm Kings, the Peaks, the Tarbecks, and House Hightower. So while they are absurdly powerful, as you can probably see from here, they're going to be fighting on tons of different fronts. So it basically makes things a bit harder for them. In fact, let's start up a battle really quickly so I can show you some of the new units that we've been creating. I've basically reworked all of the rosters to be, essentially, they're all basically new. A lot of the units sort of carried over, but they have new models. Thanks to the Rushi Total War team, we've been able to use some of their really awesome sort of unit models as a base and then work from there. And so, yeah. This theme you might recognize from Kingdom of Heaven. But yeah, so I'm really happy with the way that the rosters have turned out. The Reach still uses the old sort of Andal Kite shields, but all the other regions have their own special sort of shield types. So yeah, we have the Manderleys here. You see a lot of new UI, and you can't tell as much with the Knights, but for example with the Men-at-Arms, you can see that they have brand new models that in my opinion look great. Not to brag, a lot of the awesomeness comes from Rushi Total War. And then you have the Men-at-Arms also look really good, and I'm pretty happy with all of that. So up against us we have the Storm Kings here. They have different recruitment regions, and one important thing here is that you can have different recruitment regions within the same faction. So these here are basically all units from what will become the Kingswood. There's no king right now, so it's not called the Kingswood. But these here, yeah, they're House Spell, Buckler, Hasty, and some others. And okay, these guys, I think they're going to skirmish with us. I should probably move my my pikemen out ahead. And so yeah, they have their awesome longbowmen here, which can basically outrange my troops as well as their elite heavy spearmen. Stormline units are actually, I would say, better than most other rosters, but the flip side of that is that they are more expensive, and also there's fewer of them. The Stormlands are relatively poor, at least by comparison to, say, the Reach, and so there's not going to be as many of them. So while my levies are not nearly as good as theirs, I'll be able to field a heck of a lot more of them. Though, at the moment, that may not matter as much if they wipe them all out with their longbowmen before I get there. So I'm going to move my army forward here. There's some Hans Zimmer in the background, as you can see. I also have all new units. Another fun thing is new unit cards. I want to show these off. They aren't, a huge deal, but making over 300 new unit cards takes a long time, let's just say. So I want to show those off and be happy about them. Making me feel like my life has actually had a meaning to it besides just endlessly grinding away at unit cards. I complain, but, I do it in jest, It's great and it's fun working on the mod. Yeah, the knights are still pretty powerful, and as well as our pikemen, but I did heavily nerf pikemen and longbowmen especially. One of the major issues with 1.0 was that longbowmen were able to basically destroy an army within the first, like, 3 volleys, and pikemen were able to essentially go up against an entire army with 1 unit of pikemen and they'd win. So I've heavily nerfed them. They're still good, and I'd still recommend using pikemen in battle, but they are not nearly as overpowered as they once were. Bonus points if you know what movie this music comes from. But yeah, I drew music from a lot of places just because, you know, I like music and like movie music, and I think that it works here. So yeah. There's a lot of other new things in 2.0, just like I basically replaced just about everything, plus there's like a ton of bug fixes. Once we get back to the map, I'll show you the wall. I added that. One thing that I will point out to you if you're keeping track of the previews is that I will not be including the wildlings in 2.0. There will be wildling rebels in the north, for example, so the Starks will sometimes have to go deal with like a bunch of wildling rebels in the Wolfswood. But on the whole, there aren't going to be a lot of problems with wildlings. Just actually, there's not going to be any wildlings north of the wall, no wildling faction. I do still plan on including them in 3.0, but basically what it was creating an entirely new faction north of the wall and balancing them would have taken so long that I would not have been able to release for like another 6 months. And honestly, I wanted to just get this out of the door. But that doesn't mean that things are over with or dead or done or whatnot. So yeah. Another thing that I've apparently realized is that I say whatnot all the time, like whenever I'm, you know, making a video.
The enemy are badly bloodied.
So I'm gonna try and avoid that, but just a fair warning. Yeah, one thing that I'll be doing is I will be, basically I'd say I expect that I'll be mostly done within the next week or so. And after that I'm going to basically have 1 more week of just last-second testing, make sure that I didn't miss anything, catch all the little minor bugs that I wouldn't have otherwise caught. But during that time...
Pray our warriors' hearts filled with thirst for vengeance.
My general just died. That's not good. But basically what I'm going to be doing is I'll be giving pre-release copies of the game to some folks, basically mostly YouTubers. Just people who, you know, are influential and important and stuff. And there's other interested parties too. And so if you have a YouTube channel and want to make videos about the game and want to release them a bit early, just give me a heads up and I'll send you a copy. It won't be for another week or so, I expect. But yeah. And again, like I don't have much to do left, but writing like 50 plus house descriptions and 28 full faction descriptions and another 20-ish events for like a campaign start. That is going to be annoying, and I really don't want to do it. So whatever, you know, it happens. We do what we gotta do. So we basically won this battle at this point. I think their general is still alive. Yeah, he's right over here, hiding, and apparently walking through trees. The first men have strange powers. But yeah, so...
Off the serpent's head. The enemy general is behold and a worthless foe.
Yeah, as you can see here, the Stormlands, they have these sort of big, longer, kite shields, and again, all the different factions, all the different, like, regions, Stormlands, Riverlands, Westerlands, they all have different shield types. So yeah, something I'm kind of happy with. And so... yeah, let's just speed things up a little bit to get this over with. It's basically over. These guys are fighting to the death, and so once they're all dead, then we're good.
Our enemy flees before us. Victory is ours.
So, yeah, those are most of the main changes in 2.0. I've made a couple of other ones. For one thing, I've made it so you can no longer upgrade settlements. Now, If a bunch of people push back on this, I might change it back. But my reasoning is that this happens thousands of years before Game of Thrones, and I felt that it really didn't make sense for it to have, like, Templeton be this massive metropolis just, like, out of nowhere.
How may I serve?
So I felt it didn't make sense to have, like, basically, once you've conquered out of your first starting region, you'll basically encounter, like, entirely, like, huge castles up in, like, the northern mountains, and, like, huge cities, and, like, little tiny villages. And I just felt that that was unrealistic, and and sort of breaks the immersion. So, one thing that I've added, is Nymeria is in this one. She's pretty awesome and badass. She will command a huge stack of special Rhoynar troops, but Martell will be able to recruit more of them, and so basically you'll start off with this huge army, but it'll slowly get ground down, and you'll have to eventually rely more on your regular Dornish troops. And the Reach is basically the way it was, just more castles, more cities, more fun stuff. The Iron Islands, I've heavily nerfed House Grey Iron. They used to be way too overpowered, so now they only start with Orkmont. And both sides start with relatively tiny fleets and tiny army, and they no longer have the AP trait, which doesn't really matter for a single-player campaign, but in hotseas it made them so massively overpowered it was not even funny. Like, I played one hot seat game where, I mean, to be fair, I didn't play it all that well, but I was playing as the Lannisters, and I got defeated on, like, turn, like, 7, just because the Grey Irons came in with an army, and they basically outnumbered them, like 1.5 to 1, and yet they were able to utterly crush me simply because they had the AP trait and I didn't. And so I've taken that out. I've added Greywater Watch. That should be fun. The Cranog men are a lot of fun to play with. In the north, I've added the Northern Mountain Clans. You can conquer them and recruit their champions. I also added Skagos, which is a lot of fun. It's pretty great to, you know, march over the rugged cliffs of Skagos. No unicorns yet, but I might add some later, like maybe 3.0. The Wall is here as well, but it doesn't really go much beyond it. But still, it's nice to actually have the end of the world actually be, you know, the proverbial end of the world. The Night Fort is the current stronghold of the Night's Watch, just because at this time it was still in use. And that is mostly it. Just a lot of new rebel settlements up here for the Paps, Pedal Hall, and all of them. And yeah, just a lot of new settlements, a lot of new features. I'm really happy with 2.0 as it stands, and we'll be releasing it soon. Hopefully you'll download it. Get pumped. Thanks to all the people who have contributed, and all the people who have stuck with us since for over a year since we released 1.0, and for that matter, who have stuck with us since I first announced 1.0 back like a year and a half ago. Thanks a bunch, and hope you stay with us. Admiral Thrawn signing off.